Okay, so this one, look at this graph that shows the growth of the number of transistors per chip. Okay, with respect to years. So 1970, 75, 1980s, then 1990s, and 2000. So it's an old data, but still it can give a very good idea about how the number of transistors have grown on a single chip, on VLSI chips. Okay, so there are basically two lines. Look at this, the first straight line, the second straight line. Okay, this line, this triangular points, these are for this one represents the density of transistors on a memory chip, and this one, the circular one, the circular points are for the microprocessor chip. Okay, so you will see that the memory chip contains a denser number of transistors than a microprocessor chip. So there is a specific reason for this. Okay, but what is the overall idea that we can get from this graph? So look at this first, the microprocessor chip. The first in 1970, around 1970, I think the first microprocessor chip was launched by Intel, and that was named as 4004, if you can remember. Okay, so this was the first microprocessor chip ever launched, and it contained around how many number of transistors, around 2300 something number of transistors, just this much, around 2200 or 2300. Okay, and now we have more than 1 billion number of transistors. So look at this growth. Then in 1970, after 1975 came the most popular chip of that time, that is 8085, and I think you have studied about this also, 8085 and 8086. So how many transistors did it contain, 8085? Do you remember? 4004 contained something around 2300 number of transistors, and 8085 contained how many number of transistors? Just go and check. Okay, so in 1970 around 2300 number of transistors, and then look at this, 19 around 90. Okay, if this comes here, 80660, something around 1 million number of transistors. So in 2 decades, in 20 years, the number of transistors grew from 2300 to 1 million. And from 1990 to 1995, if we come here, this can be projected that it had around this one, 7 to 8 million number of transistors. Okay, and the rate is similar in the case of a memory chip, but the density of transistors on the memory chip is always higher than the density of number of transistors on a microprocessor chip. So you can get an idea about, like, in 1990, suppose if a microprocessor chip contained around 1 million number of transistors, then at the same time, in the same era, uh, a memory chip would have contained around 8 million, 8 to 9 million number of transistors. So the rate of increase of transistors on a microprocessor chip is around 1.25 per year, 1.25 times per year. Okay, and this is around 1.5 times per year for the case of a memory chip. So whatever is the type of chip, whether it's a microprocessor chip or a memory chip, okay, the trend is that the number of transistors are increasing per each passing year. Okay, so integration density, what is this? It will give an idea about how dense is the number of components inside a chip. A chip contains billions of transistors, but how is the density of those components, how closed they are placed with respect to each other? That is something uh, indicates about the density of the components on a chip. Okay, so if the components are placed nearer to each other, we say that it is more dense than the case when the components are placed not so nearer to each other. Okay, so it can be observed that the number of, in terms of transistor count, logic chips contain significantly fewer transistors in any given year. This is clear from the graph, mainly due to large consumption of chip area for complex interconnects. There is a reason that in the case of memory chips, uh, memory chips contains almost similar, identical kind of transistors placed in a very regular way. Okay, but it may not be the case in the case of a microprocessor chip. So in a memory chip, in a memory chip, the layout is very pretty regular in nature, and hence we can optimize it very well, and the wire connections that would arise may be handled very well as compared to the case of a microprocessor chip, where there may not be that kind of regularity, and hence it will increase the complexity of the interconnecting wires that are connected, that are used for connecting different parts, different modules, uh, different types of components inside the chip. Okay, so memory circuits are highly regular, and thus more cells can be integrated with much less area for interconnects. Mind it, the interconnect means wire, the interconnecting wire between any two input and output. Okay, and the very famous Moore's law that was introduced in 1960s by Gordon Moore, then with Fairchild Corporation, and later he founded the Intel Corporation also. He at that time he predicted that the number of transistors that can be integrated on a single die or a single chip would grow exponentially with time, and it is observed that the integration complexity or integration density, or the number of chips on a number of transistors on a chip doubles. The number of transistors gets doubled approximately every 1 to 2 years. So you will find that it doubles approximately every 18 months or so. So suppose if now we are having 1 billion number of transistors on a chip, and after 18 months, if you after 18 months it will grow to it will become double, it will contain 2 billion number of transistors. Okay, so now we come to this layers of abstraction. So look at this diagram, it indicates something. So either we can start from the topmost level, that the system level, or from the bottommost level, that is the device. So let's start from the top. Okay, you might have seen some chips, you might have seen the microprocessor chip, you might have seen the IC chips that you have used in your, I think in your BE lab, basic electronics lab, those 7400, 7402 op-amp chips. Although they did not they does not contain a huge number of transistors, huge number of components inside, huge number of gates inside the inside the chips, but we can assume that is a particular system. Okay, so the system would be something like that, the biggest of the thing that is capable of doing the complex tasks. Okay, then as you go down the system, you will find that the system contain within it various sub modules, various sub circuits. It can be in the form of different types of adders, subtractors, multipliers, multiplexers, like that. Okay, and in turn each of these modules will be containing various number of gates, and gates, or gates, not gates, NAND, NOR, XOR, this kind of gates. And each of these gate will be made up of transistors, that thing. Okay, so the transistors would be NMOS, NMOSFET, and PMOSFET transistors. Okay, so we call this as a circuit level abstraction. And at the most bottom level, we know that the transistor uh, is a device that is made up of some element, some material, some substance. What is that material? That material is silicon, basically silicon. So each of these transistors would be made up of some sort of materials. Okay, so we call this as the device level abstraction or the device level. So device means a single device that will contain one source, one gate, and one drain terminal. And this is n plus, and this is the existing channel between source and drain. So this is a NMOS device. Okay. So these are the different layers of abstraction in VLSI. So as we go from suppose bottom to top, so device level, the device structure at the level of materials, then different devices form to combine a circuit. This becomes somewhat symbolic. Then different circuits combine to form gates, different types of gates, and gates or gates and so on. And different types of gates combine to form different sub modules, different sub circuits, different modules like adders, multiplexers, subtractors. And ultimately when you combine all these kind of, okay, here flip-flops, memory elements are also there, and when you combine all these sorts of modules, you get a complete system that is capable of performing some task. Okay, so these are the level of the abstraction, and these are also the level different types of areas that exist in a VLSI world, in VLSI design. So here system module level, even here also up to this gate level, we can design and model by using language, SDL languages, that is Verilog or VHDL. Okay, then when you come to this maybe at gate level or circuit level, there are different kinds of engineers. We call those as circuit engineers that work at this middle level, and there are some device engineers that dedicatedly work only at the device level, because each of these areas is pretty vast. Okay, and you will not find any single engineer or a single person working on all of these areas. So these are different areas, large areas, and people or teams used to work at a particular level, but you should have the knowledge of all of these layers of knowledge or layers of abstraction. Okay, so we get information at each of these layers of abstraction. When we talk about the system level, we get the topmost information, where we have a view of each and every sub modules placed on an IC. And as we move down, we approach to a single device, and we go in more detail. Okay, we go in more detail, we talk about the physics uh, of the atoms, the behavior of atoms, how are they moving, then how are they colliding, and those sort of things. So as we go from top to down, we tend to go in more and more details. Okay, so this is how we understand the different layers of abstraction. So this VLSI design flow, look at this. This is a pretty simplified VLSI design flow that is there, that is in the form of this block diagram. Look at, we start from the system specification. So any system that is there to be designed, some sort of specifications are made first, that what would be the area occupied by that system, the speed of that system, about how much power it will contain, and so on and so forth. Then after preparing the specification, we go for the architectural design. We form an architecture in terms of block diagrams, and each block diagram may be a subsystem, maybe a module. Okay, then after designing of architecture, we go for the functional verification. We verify this architecture, whether the design is okay or not. You will find this verification, this functional verification, logic verification, circuit verification, and layout verification. After each of these steps, verification is done to ensure that the design circuit is correct. Otherwise, because if some error gets introduced at this level and you find that error at this level, it becomes very hard to rectify that error, and it will take again huge large amount of time, and it may not be possible to correct that error every time if you find it at a very later stage. So it's done, the verification is done at uh, almost every stage. So after verifying that architecture, the logic design is done. We will see that these things, what are these. Then logic design in terms of logics, in terms of gates is done. Then it is verified, and if it is successful, then circuit design in terms of transistor symbols is done, it is verified. Then we come for the final physical design, like the this one. Physical design will refer to this, the bottommost level, the device level. Okay. Not actually the device level, but somewhat closer to that. Okay. Then the layout verification is done, and then if all things goes hand in hand, then it is sent for fabrication and testing to a different company. Okay, so this is the top down approach. If we approach from the top towards bottom, we call this as a top down approach, and if we approach from bottom to top, it is called as a bottom up approach. So any complex IC is not designed by only top down or only bottom up approach. It will always be a mix of top down and bottom up approach. Okay, remember this. In theory, we have pure top down approach or pure bottom up approach, but in practical, every complex system is designed with a mixture of these two strategies, top down and bottom up. Okay, so this Y chart also tells us about the VLSI design flow that is practiced in VLSI industry. So basically we are having three levels or three domains of VLSI designing. Okay, the first is, let's say, structural domain, then behavioral domain, and then geometrical domain. So if we have done the coding in C programming or Java or those things, you might have wrote the code by using mostly if else sentences. Okay, so this is what it describes. Okay, the behavior of the IC, that how does it behave if we give this kind of input, this kind of output will come. Else if the input is this, the output will be like this. Else if the input is this, the output will be like this. So it is like this. Describes the behavior of the IC in terms of these if else statements. Okay, and then in the structural domain, you will basically find the connections of different structures. What are these structures? The different hardware, the different kinds of gates, or the different kinds of modules. Okay, it will be described in terms of hardware interconnections, not in terms of if else if or those kind of statements. And the geometrical layout will be like it will be showing the geometrical layout or the schematic layout of the IC diagrammatically. Okay, so now you have the basic difference between these three types of domain: the behavioral, structural, and geometrical. So let's start with the behavioral domain. Some algorithm will be there. We know that what does the algorithm contain. It contains a kind of flow chart, and all the conditions are mentioned in that whole algorithm. The conditions are written in terms of if and else statements. Okay, in each block. Then one algorithm will be equivalent to a one processor in structural domain. Okay, and this will be equivalent to a chip floor plan, that how does each transistor is sitting at what location on that particular processor. That is what this geometrical layout domain is. Then we go towards bottom, and we find that algorithms may be broken down in mm, different numbers of finite state machines, FSMs. This is again a concept from digital design, and this will be equivalent to register or ALU kind of sub modules, sub circuits in a processor. ALU is what? ALU is arithmetic logic unit. Okay, and this will be like module placement. So this domain will always talk about how does a particular thing is placed, where it is placed on a particular chip, what is the location of that chip, location of that particular component on that particular chip. Okay, then we come to module description. In behavioral domain, this will be like a leaf cell. In structural domain, leaf cell will tell you about leaf. Generally is called, is a name used for a gate. Okay, so one gate will be called as one leaf cell. Then this will be equivalent to a cell placement. Okay, placement of cells. Then finally the boolean equations will be there, that will be describing all sorts of relations between the different variables, different signals. And in a structural domain, this is equivalent to transistors. Okay, and then how the transistors are placed, or how it is actually fabricated by using some sort of masks. Okay, and mask, why it is written mask here? Because mask contain the actual location of each of the transistors that will be used for fabrication. We will see how does a mask is, how is does a mask is useful, how much mask is useful in VLSI fabrication. We will see. So this chart resembles to that of Y letter. Look at this. Okay, so this is called a, maybe this is called a Y chart, I think it is. So Y chart illustrates simplified design flow for most logic chips using design activities on 3 different domains, which resembles the letter Y. Okay, letter Y. So development of hardware is perceived within 3 domains. We have seen what are these 3 domains: the behavioral, the structural, and the geometrical. So development of hardware is perceived within 3 domains. Along these areas are the abstraction levels that describe the degree of abstraction. So all of these levels will give you some sort of, give you some sort of information or some sort of abstraction they give. So they have that kind of abstraction or information that they are transmitting, that they are providing to us. Then the outer cells are generalizations, and the inner ones are the refinements of the same subject. Again, this is like when you go from processor to register to leaf cell to transistor, you are going from top to down. So you are going from the top view to a more and more detailed view, or more refined thing in each of these 3 domains, from algorithm top level to Boolean equations, describing each of those conditions. Then the complete chip floor plan, that gives us the information about the placement of each of the components on a chip, to a mask that generally describes some transistors, or each one of those transistors, single transistor location and fabrication. Okay, so this is about Y chart, that gives us a simple idea about the 3 domains that are used in VLSI design, and also called as a simple VLSI design flow. Okay, then the next topic is this design hierarchy. So let's say what is the meaning of hierarchy? Hierarchy means the position. So if you look at in our college, we have the hierarchy like this. The topmost position is the position of VC, Vice Chancellor, then different deans, then the lower is different HODs, then different faculties. Okay, and then the different technical staffs, and then the different we can say the different students. So there is a level, there is a hierarchy. So the one that stays at the top is at the topmost level, topmost hierarchy, and then it goes it controls the lower position, lower hierarchy, and so on. It goes like this. Okay, so this was with respect to our university, but how it is used in VLSI, this is generally called as a divide and conquer approach. We know this thing right from the era of British, communalization, British colonies. So they particularly use this technique to invade different countries. So here we use divide and the same approach to dividing to divide a module into sub modules, and then repeating this operation on the sub modules until the complexity of the smaller part becomes manageable. Okay, so let's say this is one add 4, so this is one 4-bit adder. Let's say this is a 4-bit adder, and if we see that the complexity of this particular module is sufficiently high, and it may be a tedious job to design this particular block. So what can we do is that if we can uh, divide this modules, this complex module into simpler modules, it will be good. So this 4-bit adder is can be divided into 4 number of 1-bit adders. So this is 1-bit adder, this is 1-bit adder, this is 1-bit adder, and this is 1-bit adder. Okay, and these 1-bit adders can still be divided into different sums and carry, sum, carry, sum, carry for each of these, and you know the equation for these sum and carries. So that there are equation for sum in terms of XOR gates, the equations of carry in terms of AND and OR gates. Okay, so now designing at this level, sum and carry is a bit easier than designing at directly at this 4-bit adder level. So this idea of hierarchy or divide and conquer is used so that a complex design can be broken down into some simpler designs, and then we start from that simpler design and we add up those simpler designs to form a more complex design. Okay, so this is what the approach that is used in VLSI industry, and particularly I think this approach is used everywhere in every industry, or also in the practical aspects of life also. Okay, so this represents the symbols like this: a 4-bit adder, 1 2 3 4, 4 plus signs. So A3 to 0 means A0, A1, A2, A3, A3, 4 bits. B3 to 0, 4 bits. Will add, this is the input carry, and it will produce a sum 3 to 0, 4-bit sum, and C4, the fourth position of the bit or the carry out. Okay, so now at this level, each of these single bit adders can be represented by this 1-bit adder: A 1 bit, B 1 bit, carry in, sum, and C out. Then this sum and carry, one sum block that will contain some gates, one carry block that will contain some gates, and sum will produce S, CO carry out will produce C out, and like that. Okay, so basically the idea is that to divide a complex design into smaller designs, and start designing from the smaller modules, and then add those to get the final complex design. Okay, so this figure shows structural decomposition of a 4-bit adder, showing the levels of hierarchy. Okay, now this one is a figure that shows the structural hierarchy of 16-bit adder circuit. Here I think this one showed a 4-bit adder, this is showing similar a 16 bits. So what we can do, we can divide this 16-bit adder into like 4-bit 4 number of 4-bit adders. So 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4, 16-bit adders. And again we know that each of these 4-bit can be divided into more simpler blocks that will contain some XORs, gates, then carry, propagate, Manchester carry, circuit block. So this is a specific example for I think Manchester carry adder. So don't worry about that, what is Manchester carry adder. So the idea is that to break a big design into smaller designs and start from the smaller design add those things, connect those smaller circuits to get the final design done. This is the idea. So this is the decomposition of 4-bit adder in physical or geometrical domain. So look at this. This is an adder. This is 0 0 position, x0 y0 coordinate, and this point is x100 y100. So this shows the geometrical layout. Okay, because in previous slides we showed this was the structural decomposition. Okay, structural decomposition that show the structures, and this also is structural, and this one is the geometrical. Remember these three domains from Y chart. So this shows that one 4-bit adder is having 4 vertex from 0 0, and this would be I think 100 0. This is 100 100, this corner point, and this one 0 100. The location of A is at 025, the location of B signal is at 075, the location of S is at 150 coordinate, and similarly the location of C and C out. Okay, and each of these this is a 4-bit adder that can be again decomposed into 4 number of 1-bit adders. So here this is 1-bit adder, 1-bit adder, 1-bit adder, 1-bit adder. Okay, this again shows the whole thing in terms of diagram, so now you can easily relate. Okay, no sorry, this is a single 1-bit adder. Okay, so this 1-bit adder is actually amplified here. So this 1-bit adder again can be the same block can be added here, the same 1-bit adder can be again added here, and connect with the proper signals. This is A0 B0, the least significant bits. This is A1 B1, the next bit, A2 B2, A3 B3, and then you will get a complete 4-bit adder. Okay, so the location of A0 B0, A1 B1, A2 B2, and A3 B3 will be different. Okay, so suppose this is vertex is 0 0, this vertex is 400 400. So if I say that what is the location of A2, what is the location of A2, what is the location of this S1. So can you find out? Yeah, we can find out. Let's try to find out what is the location of A2 and the location of S1, and try to match with your friends if you are correct or not. If you are not able to do so, then ask me, I will tell you. But this is very simple because we know the size of each of these blocks, and the location of A is at 25, the B is at 75. So you can find out. This will be 100, this will be 100, then try. So in the physical domain, partitioning a complex system into its various functional blocks will provide a valuable guide for the actual realization of these blocks on the chip, right? Okay, and this physical view describes the external geometry of the adder, the locations of input and output pins, the location of these pins, and the pin location that allows some signals, in the case carry signals, to be transferred from one sub block to the other without external routing. We know that the carry out of this add 0 will be the carry in of add 1, and the carry out of add 1 will be the carry in of add 2, and so on. So that's why this is a common C between add 0 and add 1. And this is the output carry of add 1 that also acts as an input carry of add 2. And since these are placed very close to each other, just next to each other, so there is no need of any external wiring, they are just directly connected. Okay, so look at again the same thing, hierarchy of a 16-bit Manchester adder. Now this is a layout. So here this is a 16-bit, so this one block, this one rectangle forms a 4-bit adder. So this is a 4-bit adder. So similarly there will be one 4-bit adder here, and there will be one 4-bit adder here. So 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 becomes 16-bit. And if we can identify 1 bit adders within the 4 bit, is it possible? Yes. Look at this, there is a regular structure. If you can observe, right from here to here, this column is similar to this column and is similar to this column, right? So this column is also similar. So is it like this one column is for one bit adder, this is next bit adder, this is 1 bit adder and 1 bit adder, so it becomes a 4 bit adder, like that? Yeah, it is like this. So now you will count that it contains around 16 number of these columns, but just for highlighting that this is a 4 bit adder, this rectangle, orange color rectangle is used here, and this yellow color, just to give an idea. So now, mm, structured design principles. So the design, whatever design is done in VLSI industry, all these are pretty structured in nature. They are, the steps are defined. What are the steps that are to be followed? So we say that there is a need for structured design methodology to handle the level of, to handle very high level of complexity, because you know that the chips contain billions of transistors, billions. So it becomes very high level of complexity. It becomes very complex in nature, and hence the design methodology should be sufficient, should be efficient enough, so that we can handle those uh, huge amount of complexity. Okay. So hierarchy we have seen. Then there's a term regularity, and I think we will see these things. Yeah. Okay. Regularity, we will see different concepts that are pretty much important in VLSI design. Hierarchy we have seen, then we will see regularity, then modularity, and locality. Okay, so let's start with regularity. The term regularity shows itself indicates about the regular structures, or the structures which are similar to each other. So this is basically followed that if possible, then try to design a big circuit in terms of smaller circuits, and try to have as many number of similar smaller circuits or identical smaller circuits as possible. Okay, so for example, don't worry about the functioning. So let's say this figure A is a 2 cross 1 box, this is one multiplexer, right? This one. So suppose if A is 0, input 1 will pass to output, and if A is 1, then input 2 will pass to output. So this is a simple multiplexer, 2:1 multiplexer, and this B is a D flip flop. This is using inverters and tri-state buffers as basic building blocks. Okay, so what is the common thing here? So let's start with this. You know the equation of a simple 2 input 2:1 multiplexer. It will, if you design a simple 2:1 multiplexer, it will contain, I think, 2 AND gates, 3 AND gates, and two AND gates, two inverters, and one OR gate. So it will contain AND gate, OR gate, and inverters. So it will contain 3 types of gates. Okay, but what is achieved here, that it contains basically what, inverter, this is an inverter, this is an inverter, and these are tri-state buffers. So the number of uh, types of components that are used here are just 2. Okay, and if you go by the simple equation, it will contain 3 types of components, that it will contain inverter, AND gate, and OR gate, but here it is just containing 2 types, otherwise it will contain 3 types. Okay, so this is the difference. So if we can reduce the number of different types of components that will be used in a design, it will be better. Why it will be better? Because then we can fabricate one component okay, and then we can multiply that component any number of times in the design, and then the design process becomes simpler. The design time required also goes down pretty much. Okay, so this is about regularity, that try to use similar types of components as much as possible. So here also in this D flip-flop, the types of components that are used here are just two types. Okay, one is inverter and one is this tri-state buffers. Just two types. What are the number of components used here? The number is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 components are used. But what are the different types of components used here? Two. One is this inverter, okay, and then tri-state buffer, tri-state buffer, and tri-state buffer, and tri-state buffer. Okay, and if you design the same D flip-flop by using common gates, you will have to use different types of gates, maybe 3 or 4 types of gates, AND gates, OR gates, NOT gates. Okay, at least 3 types of gates you will have to use, but here it is using just 2 types of components. So there is an effort to reduce the different types of components used, so that it becomes easier to design the system, and also it reduces the time time that it takes to design the system. Okay, so this is about regularity. The effort should be like that, so that we use less number of different types of components. Okay, now the next concept is modularity. So suppose if a big system contains smaller systems, okay, then modularity says that each of those smaller systems that finally makes that big system. Okay, so if possible, then make those smaller systems independently. Design those smaller systems in such a way that those smaller systems can be designed independent of each other. Okay, and then after designing those smaller components, bring those in one bring those components in a proper space, and then combine them effectively to realize a bigger system. Okay, so what is the idea, what is the benefit of this? So if smaller components can be designed independently, then we can have different people working on those designs in parallel, simultaneous to each other, and once they are ready, then we can combine those smaller components to realize the bigger system. Okay, so this will also significantly um, reduce the time needed for designing a complex system. Okay, so this says that the various functional blocks which make up the larger system must have well defined functions and interfaces. Same thing. So modularity allows that each block or module can be designed relatively independently from each other. They should not depend on the design of other modules, otherwise it may not be possible to design them independently. And all of the blocks can be combined with ease at the end of the design process to form the large system. Okay, and like I said, that the concept of modularity enables the parallelization of the design process. So if the things are done in a parallel way, then the design time reduces significantly. Okay, then locality. So it talks about the internal details of a particular component of a particular submodule. So it says that internal details remain at the local level. The concept of locality also ensures that connections are mostly between neighboring modules. It also talks about the neighborhood. Okay, not just the internal thing, also about the locality means particular area, particular local neighbor area. So the concept of locality also ensures that connections are mostly between neighboring modules, avoiding long distance connections as much as possible. So it may not be possible all the time, but the effort should be such that the connections that are made, those connections should be local to each other, should be in the neighborhood area. We should not use a very long wire to connect one module present at one corner of the chip to another module that is present at a different corner of the chip. It may be required, it may not be uh, it may not be completely eliminate this kind of conditions, but this should be avoided as much as possible. Why? Because this is extremely important for avoiding long interconnect delays, because nowadays the device sizes are growing, are becoming less, smaller and smaller in size, and hence, and also the size of interconnects or the size of wires, they're also becoming smaller. So the delays provided by a component are becoming comparable to the delays provided by the interconnecting wires. Okay, so now in terms of delays, as long as the behavior of a wire or a behavior of a component is considered, they are providing almost similar kind of delays. Okay, so now it's not possible to ignore the delay provided by these interconnects, and hence if we use a very long interconnect, it will induce, it will give rise to high amount of delay, and the system will slow down. So that is why the locality concept is very important. So there is one funda that time critical operations can be performed, should be performed locally, okay, without the need to access distant modules or signals. If necessary, the replication of some logic may solve this problem in large system architectures. Sometimes, if necessary, if required, then they add some extra hardware also in the chip if it is giving us better performance in terms of the speed of the chip. Okay, it is justifiable to add some extra hardware in exchange of uh, better performance of the chip. Okay, so this was about the different concepts used in VLSI hierarchy. Then what was that? I think regularity, then modularity and locality. And then we will start with this more VLSI design styles, different types of VLSI design styles that are used for designing ICs. Okay.